I'd like to welcome Andy Smith. He is a general partner at Center Electric. Please give a hand for Andy.
Hi everyone. Again, like everyone else, just thank everyone for staying late, and thank the panel or the group of startups who presented so far for doing the same thing. And might as well ask for a round of applause for them again. So at Center Electric, we invest in the Internet of Things. Most of our investments are focused on infrastructure, but we're very interested in the general evolution of the Internet in terms of what comes after mobile. And we think IoT is where that's happening. I think the first question I'd like to throw to the group here is thinking about how do you get started? Once upon a time, Netflix distributed DVDs to people. It's hard to remember, but one of their critical partnerships had to do with getting an insert into DVD makers' boxes in order to get people to try to use this new device. I'd like each person to respond to who is their critical distribution partner who gets them in the door.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So at Zuli, as I mentioned, we really see ourselves as a piece of the experience that we can add on to other products in the market as well as our own. So while we are sold in distribution directly to consumers, I would say our most valuable is by working closely with our partners like Nest and Philips to be able to build exposure. In Nest, for example, we bundle our product as a 3-pack with Nest to be able to enable presence into their customers' homes, to be able to educate them on what the value is. And similarly, at Lowe's, we're on an end cap where we can show a video of how a Zuli plus Nest and so forth improves the overall home experience.
Yeah, and for us, actually, we only need a very few number of partners in the REITs or property management or ownership group and development group. So we actually only need about 60 partners. So our clients are our distribution channel that helps us get to the install base. So we have partners that have 440,000 homes, for example. And so for us, when we have 60 partners by 2019, that gets us 1 million homes, 40 million devices, and about 3 million users. So the funny thing is our customer acquisition cost is very low, if not minimal, because of the fact that our real estate partners are our clients and they are our distribution channel.
So an interesting thing about our product is that it's a consumer-facing product, but there are so many verticals that our technology can basically add value to. So we've been contacted by Steelcase. Their executive team flew us up to explore embedding Nokia technology into their furniture, into their hospital beds. We also were contacted by Toyota. That's a huge potential partner, actually integrating this on manufacturing lines and having a very accessible and immediate shut-off switch or control switch that isn't location or physical switch dependent. And of course in the consumer space where we already have over 1,000 pre-orders just directly through our website. Of course there are natural retail channels, but also home installers and builders. Our big vision eventually is actually to, not with our consumer product, but actually embed our technology into walls where we can literally replace light switches anywhere and create a much more accessible and integrated solution that doesn't require a button or a switch.
I think we've been really fortunate that a lot of the garage doors in America or worldwide are actually not smart today. So we actually haven't really tapped into that market. And the unique thing about our company is that we really believe in we need to address a specific problem and make sure that we acquire the users first. And I think one of the reasons why Internet of Things, specifically smart home, hasn't really caught on is because all these smart home systems are quite complicated and expensive for users to start. So the way we started was, let's start with a device, let's solve a specific problem, and let's make it sticky for the users. And so far we've been selling quite well on Amazon, so we have a lot of users and return users buying other devices that we're making. So this is how we're trying to get into people's homes and make sure that they get interested in smart home solutions.
For us, I mentioned it already, insurance. I think that a lot of the products here and a lot of the IoT products you see could be used in a number of different settings. So I think to some of the root of the question of where do people get started and how can you kind of enhance your distribution in a less expensive way, one of the things we focused on was a lot of small tests, a lot of conversations with a lot of companies. Every big major Fortune 500 company out there is looking at how IoT is going to change their business, but what is your specific product's value proposition and where does it touch multiple points within an organization? I think that's something we learned by kind of going after 10 markets and really kind of focusing on one, and there's a couple secondary ones we're working with, but insurance, there's just multiple touch points for us, and it was kind of became, but it took a while a clear initial partner set for us.
Great. Other questions in the audience, or should I throw another one? Okay, I'll throw another one out there. So, home automation is not a particularly new idea. I mean, I've used so many generations of embarrassing automation that I have closets full of it. But what makes now the time for your solution to work, and what makes you guys, the team, to make it work? Why don't we, where's the microphone now? Okay. There. Okay.
I could start, or unless you want us to go in order again. So I think I totally agree with that sentiment. Home automation has been around for 20 years, and for us, the end nodes are kind of dumb switches that just report state. I think the difference is that it's now called IoT, and that's where now we have a fancy new term for it. But also, hardware costs are going down, and we do have mobile technology that has kind of laid the groundwork for what we're doing. So there's more awareness and an easier way to get to the consumers. But the way we're doing it from our perspective is not necessarily to go after the consumers, because the customer acquisition cost is way too high. I believe Nest spends $250 to sell a $250 device. So from our perspective, to go after the real estate developers, and with the shifting tide of millennials wanting access to value versus actual ownership, it makes sense from a subscription-based model and to give it to them for free in some sense and just have it work as soon as they move in. So that's kind of the model that we're going after, is that we actually want to change the real estate industry, not go after the consumers, and help the real estate industry get into the future just the way that phones became smart and smartphones, and that was actually from working with the industry, the hardware providers and the telcos.
We agree with the hardware cost. It's much easier to prototype. I think a big part of it is what you all have in your pocket. It's your smartphone. From a consumer standpoint, you can't use most of these devices without a phone. And if you think back, 10, 15 years ago, maybe some of the technology would have been there. Yes, it would have been more expensive, but would you have been logging into a computer and have a home dashboard? Like, you could, to some degree, but actually having it on you makes it valuable. So I think that a lot of the advances with the actual smartphone is a huge reason why it's actually starting to spread further.
I'll echo that statement, but just broadly speaking, it's really just the critical mass of familiarity and adoption of IP connected and personal area connected devices. But the need has always been there. All of you guys probably remember the infomercials for the clapper, and people love the idea of simplifying the relationship between them and the devices through this magically simple interface. And so, to your point, now so many people, everyone here has an Android or iOS device, probably mostly iOS. But sort of the paradox is that all this technology is aiming to make things simple. But there's a myriad of mobile apps and interfaces that I think create sort of confusion and complexity that might actually be slowing down some of the adoption, because to a lot of people there's a perception that it's expensive, or there's no unified turnkey solution. There's so many different options, so there's sort of a paradox of choice with so many ways to integrate, and ultimately people are looking for just a simpler experience, a better way to interact.
And I think it is I think it's harder to convince people that they need smart home solutions at home. I think it's a lot easier if you can actually solve a specific problem. So for example, I think the home security system has been around for many, many years, and it's very expensive. People have to pay subscription to do something very simple. So I think if we can integrate, Internet of Things devices, sensors and monitors, and to your smartphone devices, I think you're offering a solution to an existing problem, and it's a different way to solve a traditional problem.
I definitely agree with everything said here. I think that smartphone and cost of devices helps to grow to a larger market, but to be kind of honest, like we're still very early in this market. There's still a long way to go between where we are now and to really all of our homes being fully automated, and I still think we're very much in the early stages. As you mentioned, it's come a long way, and I still think there's a long ways to go. And I think a big piece of bridging that gap is how do we not only just add connectivity devices, but how do we actually solve problems in these users' homes, improve the value where it becomes more of a need and less of just a luxury to have smart home, but becomes a daily part of our lives. And I think that there's a lot of innovation going on to move into that direction, but there's still a long way to go as well.
Got it. Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? Questions from the audience? No? Okay. So I think a bunch of you have mentioned partners, works with Nest, things like that. I'd like to hear how you think about ecosystems and how you deal with different ecosystems, and do you create your own or do you partner with one of them?
So I think it's definitely something that every company in this industry has to look at. I mean, there's HomeKit, there's Nest, there's SmartThings, there's all these different platforms. We always have thought at Zuli, and our focus has been that we want to enable this presence, this contextual awareness to all devices, no matter what platform, no matter what user device that they're using. But it really does have to be a step-by-step, especially for an early startup, to be able to really focus on building these great experiences. I think that all developers should be working towards having these devices work together, but they're also, it takes a lot of development debt to do. It takes a lot of work to get these all working. And so I think everybody, all these developers, it's important to think about what can I do first to really prove the experience and build value, and then what are the next devices, the next platforms that continue to build out to a wider market.
I'll go. So from our perspective, we really think about of us as kind of the chips inside of a building. We literally run on the copper. We do measurement of energy, current energy. And so we really think of ourselves as we're essentially creating an accelerometer or GPS, the thing that gives context to everything else inside of a building. And the Googles and the Apples are kind of, they will always be the operating system, right? They will have the Apple HomeKit, Google has its Nest Weave and Thread, Samsung. And so other devices like the ones on stage here for us are application layers, and the devices like Sonos, Amazon Echo will always be, there'll be probably new devices coming out every 2 days, and we are going to rely on the Googles and the Apples and other operating system levels to integrate those, because we feel like that is trying to push a rock uphill. But what we do is, as a sensor base, the infrastructure level, is give context to the Googles and Apples and the application layer on top of that. And so that's kind of how we think of our system, and that's how we believe that we will integrate with other systems, and we will rely on the integrators to do the integration, but we will be the sensors inside.
Yeah, so right now, there's sort of a marketplace turf war, and there are all these different platforms, and ultimately, I think as with any industry, over time there's going to be a consolidation where big players are going to basically provide basically a holistic solution that will give customers, one way to integrate with a lot of things around them. But for the time being, the bridge gap is really, a lot of these hubs, Insteons and Winks that allow us to interface not just with IP-connected devices, but even with personal area network platforms like Zigbee and Z-Wave. What we're trying to do at Nokia is really say, there are a lot of different devices, a lot of different control systems, but if you distill everything to the simplest, experience, using our existing environment, the things that are already around us, as a way to control the world is really the most natural. And so, if you can have your table all of a sudden be an IP connected device, or your wall, or furniture in your bedroom or anywhere, and then unleash whatever functionality you want through that, that's really a huge value prop. And that's sort of what Amazon is trying to do with their Echo, and recently came out with the Amazon Tap and Dot, is really create a very accessible interface. But ultimately you're seeing, Amazon's platform, for example, handpick, procure a few solutions, and ultimately consumers and solution providers are in conflict, where consumers want simple, they want few choices that just work, and everyone's trying to carve out a piece of the market. So consolidation is going to be the outcome of the future.
I think Garage for Buddy is actually pretty lucky that we are making the sensors. We are the ones that's monitoring, so we know exactly what's happening at your home. So we've been approached by a few different platforms and ecosystems because they don't have a way to actually communicate with the garage door openers. So we've been pretty lucky in that a lot of these ecosystems and platforms, they don't have the device that we're offering. So this is how we're partnering up with SmartThings, Amazon Echo. So in a lot of senses, we are the devices that these platforms are trying to offer.
I think the only thing we would add, we're definitely pro-integration, Nest and Ift and all those things too. I think as you think about the user experience, I think something that people forget is, the devices that are up here today for the most part are do-it-yourself devices. So if you start to have 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 50 devices in a home, when you think about full-on home automation, how many people are actually going to self-install that many devices, even if they do work well together? What's that kind of limit, right? So I think one of the things we think a lot about is where does that ultimately go? I think you're going to see some service industry develop even more around when people have full-on home automation, like that AT&T commercial where every single thing in the home is connected, right? It's not really happening today at scale. This is one of the reasons. Expense is another reason. But I think when you have 2 to 4, 5 devices, you're okay with having 3 or 4 or 5 apps on your phone. It's kind of annoying, but you have a whole bunch more on your phone already. So I think that's the next phase where even at that stage, you're gonna start to see Apple and Google butting up against some really big companies that are already doing some of those kinds of things, like iControl and some of those bigger players that most consumers maybe aren't really aware of.
Great. So I think all of you are shipping or at least have a beta product somewhere. If you could run down what is and you can, this is a safe zone.
You can be honest. What is the most surprising thing that you learned? It's kind of quickly. What's the most surprising thing you learned that gave you a big change in terms of how you think about your product or how you think about your market from the early days of actually shipping?
I can go. One thing we found is that we were taking off-the-shelf hub and writing our entire software stack off of a off-the-shelf hub that was being ODM'd. And what we found is that there's nothing commercially viable for enterprise-grade level deployment when you try to deploy thousands or tens of thousands of units that have 40 devices in each home. So we actually looked at this market and looked at how we had to create our own, because there's not really at the level of self-diagnostics or even just thinking through, because it's such a nascent industry, that there hasn't been a lot of thought about once after you deploy, what happens, right? So there's not a lack, there's a lack of self-diagnostics, a lack of being able to recover from a power outage or from an internet outage, and to even have battery power backup and such. And so I think you guys all heard of, if you guys are sitting here, you know about Wink and kind of how Wink hubs fail. Even Nest went down in December. And I think the fact that there's a rush to market, to get products out to market and not really think about the post-market deployment. We've deployed 100 units in 5 days in Portland. We also have a building in San Francisco as well. And watching what has happened in those deployments, we really realize that there has to be a commercially viable enterprise-grade hub that can actually run the ecosystem.
one of our biggest learnings from all the beta testing we did leading up to our launch was early on we thought the shortest amount of setup time would make it easy. We thought short amount of time meant easy. And we rolled this out with a bunch of people, and what we found was that we missed a number of steps in user experience. And actually in the product that we've launched, our setup time, while still very short, we've actually extended it. We've added a number of additional screens and steps that people actually have to go through now during setup, and it involves them in the process. A lot of people say consumers and people are stupid and they don't get it. I disagree with that. I actually think people are scared. I think people are scared that they're going to screw it up. It's technology, they're going to mess it up. It's our job to make you feel unbelievably smart about what you just did. Do you really know that when you put this on a door, like what's going to happen? And the first user experience we created, we didn't do a good job with that. We just thought it was going to be short. And so that was probably our biggest learning coming from getting product out into people's hands. And it was beta product and all that, but that was a big thing for us.
So can I add one thing to that? Because we kind of found similar things. So when we rolled out 100 units in 5 days, that was 4,000 devices that we had to install in 5 days. And one thing we found was that pairing process in IoT is just, it's lame. You have to push a button on a device and then push a button on the hub and then check on your phone or PC. And so to do that, it was about 20 to 30 minutes of extra time on the install process. It's just stupid. So we looked at that system and said, okay, we're going to come up with a way to automatically pair and provision all devices so that it knows to pair and provision to that unit, not the unit next door or above. So we came up with a subgroup methodology. And so that was one thing that we found that no one has even thought of as a problem, is that pairing process right now in IoT is just stupid. So anyways.
Yeah, so just to echo what everyone here is saying, really, there's a lot of intimidation. Consumers perceive so much complexity and integrating smart technology into their homes, into their environments. And so there's really a mismatch because it's sort of a paradox that all these devices are, aimed at providing simplicity, but you have to sort of, between achieving that simplicity and where you are now, there's this setup process, and how am I going to get to that path of a simpler life, a simpler user experience through these devices? If I have to go through some smart home installer or set up a Wink or Insteon hub. So I think it's very similar to software or user interface where you have to have it. The mantra is don't make me think. It needs to be something that someone that has no clue how to use a smartphone or a child can actually understand and not be intimidated by. And so I think it's really there's a perception that we need to tackle through the right solutions, but also the right messaging. And what we really, with our technology, we started our company without a product, but just sort of with a vision and some intellectual property that we really wanted to find a path to market with. And initially, we had a smart bed technology that you would tuck into your bed, and it would not only do the standard, monitor your sleep and have a haptic smart alarm, but gesture enable your bed. And then we sort of pivoted into sort of a solution that really added that interactive capability to everything, because there is a huge pain point that is slowing down adoption of IoT.
I think for us, one of our biggest learning was we wanted to be able to provide a secure solution, but yet also flexible, very easy to set up. And the thing is, initially when we designed our solution, we wanted to make sure security is the topmost, addressing all the security concerns that our customer had. So at first, customers wanted very close, and the only way that they could control their garage door was when they're right next to their home. But But slowly, as time progressed, they actually wanted to open up and they wanted to be able to connect to their home when they're not at home. So we found that very interesting in that initially when we acquired the users, security was their biggest concern, but slowly they wanted to be able to connect to it when they're not at home. So what we've done is we've slowly created a solution that actually allowed both spectrums of the users, where we still make sure that the users that really care about security still get those features, but the users that wanted flexibility and wanted to easily control their garage doors no matter where they are, they also get that feature while still have the security in place. So we had a really flexible solution that allowed them to configure and control.
I think for us, actually, the most surprising thing we learned is actually as we started building into some of the commercial market opportunities as well. And as we started talking to some of these partners that we were working with, started realizing some of the really substantial needs there are in the commercial market. Specifically, about 55% of energy used in commercial markets is wasted actually when nobody's in the office. And up to 35-40% now in buildings, energy is actually coming from plug-load devices. And so we knew that that was an area we wanted to go into, and as we started to explore building out into these large distribution in the commercial side, on top of that, we started seeing what the value of presence has on that side too. And different in terms of the smart home side, where it's adapting things, giving you that great experience as you're walking from room to room, but starting to look at it even on the data side and what that data and understanding of how users use spaces in these big office buildings, how they and then how they can track that down to an individual and be able to optimize their real estate for that. And that was something that, when we started the company, was something we thought was really far out, and it was really interesting to see the need that was there right now, and as we've been exploring that.
Great. I think that's all we have time for. So I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank everyone for sharing their stories and showing us their startups. And let's give everyone a hand